Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the regularly scheduled Ways and Means Committee. I'm the chair of the committee. My name is Abdi Warsami, and joining me today are Council Members Cunningham, Johnson, Fletcher, and Council Member Palmisano. And we are a quorum of the committee and can therefore conduct the committee's business today. Today we have 33 items for consideration, which includes 3 walk-on items. I will start by reading the consent items. Item number 1 is a local government amicus brief in RG and GR Harris Funeral Homes, Inc. Versus EEOC and Amy Stevens Altitude Express, Inc. versus Zada and Bostock versus Clayton County. And item number 2 is a legal settlement workers' compensation claim of Laura Pillen. Item number 3 is a legal settlement, Matt Hastings versus the City of Minneapolis. Item number 4 is a bid for the Minneapolis Convention Center's exhibitor services and first aid remodel project. Item number 5 is a contract amendment with Minnesota Department of Transportation for use of land under highway bridges. Item number 6 is a contract amendment with 310 Partners LLC for lease at the Flower Exchange Building. Item number 7 is a contract amendment with Clever Design for impound lot improvement project. Item number 8 is a contract amendment with 331 2nd Avenue South Novel Co-working LLC for communications cable equipment. Item number 9 is a contract amendment with Adolphson and Peterson Construction for Eastside Storage and Maintenance Facility Project. Item number 10 is a plumber's salary schedule. Item number 11 is a grant from City Foundation and Living Cities for the City Accelerator Initiative on Inclusive Procurement. Item number 12 is a contract amendment with eligible providers for employment and training services. Item number 13 is a contract with various suppliers to provide full-time employee recruitment services. And I'm going to read up this item because there was a bit of change to the consent item that we had earlier. And this item, we're authorizing a contract with Compre Consulting, Inc., Recruiters of Minnesota, True Source IT, LLC, and Valair Consulting and Recruiting for a period of 3 years and an amount not to exceed a total of $200,000. An amendment has been distributed to committee members, and this basically, the amendment amends item 13 as amended to replace Vine Group with Valair Consulting and Recruiting due to a clerical error that we had in IT. And then we move to item number 14, which is a contract with Navix Global, Inc. to provide subscription licenses for policy and procedure management software. Item number 15 is a contract with Prosky, Inc. to provide change management certification services. Item number 16 is a contract with Tyler Technologies, Inc. to provide a computer-assisted mass appraisal, or CAMA system. Item number 17 is a contract amendment with Variant Americas, Inc. for hosting and support of the 311 Lagan application. Item number 18 is a grant agreement with American Indian Community Development Corporation for acquisition of 1500 Elliott Avenue. Item number 19 is a contract with Mid-Minnesota Legal Aid for legal representation to low-income Minneapolis tenants facing eviction. Item number 20 is a grant from the Minnesota Department of Health for evidence-based home visiting program. Item number 21 is a grant from the Minnesota Department of Health for contaminants outreach and education. Item number 22 is a contract with Lake Street Council, Minnesota Peace Building Leadership Institute, Banyan Community, Juxtaposition Arts, Art is My Weapon, the Camden Promise, and East Phillips Improvement Coalition for citywide violence prevention fund projects. Item number 23 is an agreement between Minneapolis Police Department and Blaine Police Department for mutual aid during large-scale events. Item number 24 is a contract with Accent Enterprise, Inc. for purchase and storage of body-worn cameras, tasers, and CAD integration. Item number 25 is a 2019 alley renovation project approval and assessment. Item number 26 is a contract amendment with CDM Smith for Fridley Campus Industrial Electrical Rehabilitation Project. Item number 27 is a contract amendment with AE2S Construction for additional services for Pump Station 7 outdoor construction project. Item number 28 is a contract amendment with James Corner Field Operations for Nicollet Mall reconstruction project. Item number 29 is a contract amendment with Maya Contracting Inc. for Nicollet Mall reconstruction project. Item number 30 is a contract with Kimberly Horn and Associates Inc. for engineering and design services for Grand Avenue South Street reconstruction project. Item number 31 and 32 we'll get back to. These are our discussion items. And then we have the walk-on items, which were not on the printed agenda. And I'm going to add them to the consent agenda. And the following RCAs have been distributed to committee members as well at the dais. So item number 33 is a bid for public service building project, casework and millwork, and accepting the sole bid of distinctive cabinet design submitted on event number 5 in the amount of $1,182,000 to furnish and deliver casework and millwork, tax-exempt material purchase for the public service building project. Item number 34 is a bid for public service building project flooring, and this is accepting a low bid of Acoustics Associates, Inc., submitted on, in the base amount, bid amount of $1,332,928, and an alternate number 1 for an additional $253,570 for a total of $1,586,498 to provide all materials, labor, equipment, and incidentals necessary for the public service building project. And the final item, item number 35, is a bid for the public service building project, acoustic ceiling style fabric wall panel, accepting the low bid of Acoustics Associates, Inc. In the amount of $4,245,634 to provide all materials, labor, equipment, and incidentals necessary for the public service building project, acoustic ceiling tile fabric wall panel, and authorizing a contract for the project, all in accordance with city specifications. And so I move approval of all items except items 31 and 32, which are in discussion and we will discuss later. And and all the amendments and the walking items. So is there any discussion on the consent agenda that we have? Seeing none, I'll move approval, and all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those against, and those consent items have been approved. Thank you very much. Now we move to our discussion items, and we have 2 items to discuss today, items 31 and 32. And item 31 is city's local sales taxes and the Minnesota Sports Facilities Authority's financial condition overview. And we have Mr. Mark Winkelhaig here to give us an overview and of that discussion item. Go ahead, Mark.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, council members. I'm Mark Winkelhaig, Director of Development Finance. I'm here to present the Finance Department's annual overview of the city's local taxes, sales taxes, and the MSFA's financial condition. As I go through the PowerPoint presentation, feel free to stop me if you have any questions. Hopefully I can answer them. If not, Mr. Rupp is also available to take some questions. So briefly, just kind of breeze through what our 5 local sales taxes are. These are all authorized by the state, and all of these taxes are collected and distributed by the Minnesota Department of Revenue on our behalf. We get 2 distributions each month of these taxes. The first is our local sales tax. It's 0.5% citywide. It applies to all the same goods and services that the state sales tax applies to. And this particular sales tax produces the most revenue for the city, approximately $38 million per year. The second one is the city's lodging tax that applies to establishments with more than 50 rooms. So this is basically hotels located anywhere in the city. It's a 3% tax. We're hoping it's going to be a 3% tax. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. But like I say, it's citywide. I'm going to skip down then to the third of the taxes is the downtown liquor tax, 3%, and this only applies in the downtown taxing area. The next slide will show you the boundaries of the downtown taxing area, and this particular tax only applies to on-sale liquor, not off-sale. Number 4 is the downtown restaurant tax, 3%. Once again, only applies in the downtown taxing area on food and beverage sales. And then the last of our 5 local sales taxes is the entertainment tax at 3% citywide. And this applies to a number of things: admission fees, the use of amusement devices, food, drink, and merchandise sold at public places during live performances, and also all short-term lodging. So this applies to the largest hotel as well as someone who's renting out their house through Airbnb. So back up to the lodging tax. Prior to 2009, this tax was 3%, dating all the way back to, I believe, 1986 when it was first authorized. But there was a cap of 13% on the sum of the state and local taxes that a hotel guest, for instance, could pay. And then what happened in 2009, the state raised its sales tax by 0.3%. This was the legacy amendment, you might remember, for clean water and preservation of wetlands, et cetera. So that means our local lodging tax was reduced by 0.3%. And then similarly, in 2017, Hennepin County imposed a new 0.5% sales tax that was under the cap. So their tax went into effect, and our lodging tax was reduced another 0.5%. Now, in the 2009 legislative session, in the omnibus tax bill, this was changed. The 13% cap was eliminated. It was replaced with a 6.5% cap, but it only applies to our local taxes on lodging. So we have our 0.5% sales tax that applies. We have our 3% entertainment tax that applies. And now we can have up to a 3% lodging tax like we had for decades, basically. In order for this tax increase to become effective, the City Council will have to pass a resolution sometime in the next several months, so you can expect to see that resolution come before you. If that is implemented and if the lodging tax goes back up to 3%, that will generate about $3.2 million in additional lodging tax revenue for the city. So as I mentioned before, here is the boundaries of the downtown taxing area. It applies once again to our downtown liquor and restaurant taxes. The boundaries are set in the state statute, so if the city would ever decide in the future they wanted to change those boundaries, they would have to do that legislatively. Here's sort of a recent history of the city's...
Mr. Winkelhaig, let me interrupt you for a moment. Council Member Palmisano has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Winkelhenkel, thank you for all of the work and thoughts on the lodging tax. I think that's good news for the city of Minneapolis. I do have a question on the map on the previous slide. I think that this looks like one way to draw in the area that maybe 15 years ago, 20 years ago, looked like our downtown. But what I notice about this map in your slide is that specifically drawn out of this area are some of our most popular restaurants, some of our most popular new liquor establishments, and it seems a little bit unfair. So I'm curious you did mention that this is the legislative state statute change. I guess my first question is, am I looking at this right? Are places in Elliott Park drawn in, some restaurants in Elliott Park? It looks like it's kind of cut out, but I noticed places that are some of our, Airline Magazine restaurants, Spoon and Stable, Monte Carlo, those kinds of places are not within the boundary of this map. Is that correct?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Palmisano, that's correct. There are areas in the warehouse district in North Loop that are not. There are areas in Elliott Park that are not. And, there have been I'm aware of some discussions between council members and city staff, both last year and this year, about whether it would be appropriate for the city council to attempt to change the boundaries.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does seem unfair. Is there a cap that our 3% tax for liquor and restaurant taxes maxes out at? Where if we were to redraw these boundaries, it would be more fair then for those restaurants all within the downtown area? Meaning their overall contribution to this, or people's tabs would be lessened?
I'm sure there are arguments for and against redrawing the boundaries to include, various restaurants and other establishments in order to make it fairer. So I can't really, I'm not been a party to any of those discussions, so.
Right, but I guess my question is there a cap on the amount of liquor and restaurant taxes that we receive as a city? I think the answer is no.
No, that's correct.
Yeah,
Yes.
and I think there's a question from Councilmember Fletcher, who represents most of this area, or comment.
Thank you, Chairperson. So just to clarify, so Spoon and Stable and the Monte Carlo are in a portion of the warehouse district that is included in this district, so they do pay those taxes. They're just south of 3rd, or just east of 3rd, rather. But there certainly are restaurants that are in and out of this. I'm going to just take this a step further and say, does it seem unfair that the state legislature drew a boundary around a portion of the city of Minneapolis in order to fund stadiums that are used as a regional resource? It absolutely is. There are 50,000 people who live downtown who, if we walk to our neighborhood restaurant, are paying an additional sales tax day in and day out, whether or not we use this. There are small business owners who have to compete with businesses outside of this zone who know that their tickets are going to be a little bit higher. And I think many of those businesses at this point, I think when this was done initially, you might imagine that much of their business would come from stadium traffic and would be sort of justified by the structure. I do not think that's the case any longer. I think most of those businesses are targeting local business that can just as easily go across the river, and I feel perfectly comfortable expressing that, yes, this is unfair. Yes, this is something that the entire state decided is true for a couple of our neighborhoods, and that should not be how taxing works.
Thank you, Councilmember Fletcher, and I think Councilmember Palmisano has a follow-up question. Go ahead.
Mr. Winkelhinkel, have we ever looked at also including areas that there are similar types of restaurants and zoning and that sort of thing into what a map might look like, and that might also include the uptown area?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Palmisano, I'll have to defer. I have not been party to any of these type of discussions. They may have occurred. Mr. Ruff, if you're aware of any. No.
And Mr. Winkelhinkel, do we know where these taxes are coming from? Do we know what proportion of them are being Minneapolis? Do we have any visibility into where that revenue is coming from other than from restaurant tabs?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Palmisano, we do get data from the Department of Revenue once a year, and we can drill down to find out, specifically where they're coming from. We cannot make all that information public, though, because that's prohibited. But, we could generally say certain types of establishments generated a certain amount, located in a certain area of this downtown, but just not down to the specific individual business.
I guess I'm not asking about businesses specifically, but rather are these coming from people that are driving into Minneapolis to go to the stadium, for example, versus people who are everyday users and restaurant goers in a neighborhood that they live in.
Yeah. Councilmember Palmisano, no, we don't have that type of data. We can't tell who actually is paying these taxes, whether they're
Right.
in the neighborhood, in the metro, or, outside the metro. So,
It would be nice if we could find a way to survey that and figure that out. Thanks.
All right, thank you.
The next slide is showing the recent history of our local sales tax collections, and you can see things sort of were at its low point in 2009 during the Great Recession, but since that time, over the next 9 years, there has been steady and healthy growth in the sum of all the taxes, local sales taxes that we collect. Back in 2009, it was 55 million, and now we're at 90 million, so that's a considerable jump. All of the various categories have increased, particularly the entertainment taxes experienced the largest percentage increase. If you look at the 2018 bar, you can see that the largest category is our local sales tax in blue. That's the $38 million I mentioned. Second is the entertainment tax. That's the yellow bar at the top, and that's at about $24 million. And the other taxes fall in between there. This particular slide is just to give you an idea of, for various activities and various sales, down the left-hand column, these are examples only, what sales taxes would apply. So there's actually nine sales taxes that might apply to any particular activity, to our state, to our county, and then we have our 5. And they sum over on the right-hand column, and you can see there's quite a range, as low as 8%. So if you're eating at a restaurant that's not downtown in the city of Minneapolis, you'll pay a little over 8%. On the other side, if you're buying a cocktail at a downtown bar that has entertainment going on that night, you could pay a little bit over 16.5%. So quite a range. This is more for informative purposes, just to kind of give you a feel for what taxes apply in what situations. Then I'd like to mention a couple other related items. First of all, the Minnesota Sports Facilities Authority, the MSFA, was established back in 2012. There's a 5-member board. 2 of those members were appointed by Mayor Hodges. They serve 4-year terms. And this is the entity that oversees the operation of U.S. Bank Stadium. Related to that, many of you perhaps remember the Downtown East redevelopment project, which occurred about the same time as the stadium was going up. It's this 5-block area that includes the Commons, as well as the 2 Wells Fargo's tower and the MSFA parking ramp, the Mills Fleet Farm ramp. There were 3 parties involved there: the city, the developer, which is Ryan Companies, and the MSFA. The city issued a little under $62 million in bonds to pay for a portion of that project. We financed it. There was no contribution of money, but we issued bonds. Those bonds are payable by Ryan payments that we receive for at least the first 10 years. So those have been coming in like clockwork. We're paying off our debt. And then after that, we will be relying on the parking revenues from these 2 parking ramps that are owned by the MSFA. The first is the Mills Fleet Farm ramp, the one that's attached to the stadium above grade, that has about 1,600 stalls in it. And then across the street under the LRT station is the second ramp that's owned by the MSFA, and that has about 450 stalls in it. Those 2 ramps are operating as projected. Revenues are coming in a little bit more each year. So right now it looks like once the Ryan payments stop, everything should still proceed according to projections. And then there was, as you might remember, some agreements for the use of the Commons between the city, the MSFA, and the Vikings. So here, you might ask, well, where are these taxes going if we're collecting $90 million? And the answer is a list of things. The first of which, these taxes are used to support the city's general fund. That's about $31.7 million this year. Of that total, all of the entertainment taxes go into the city's general fund. That's $24.4 million or thereabouts, and the remainder will come from the other collection of 4 taxes. Then we also have city debt that's outstanding. So the convention center has bonds that are still payable this year and next year, and we pay about $27 million a year in debt service on those convention center bonds. So that's an important number to remember, $27 million, because you'll see where that comes in later on. There's also outstanding Target Center renovation bonds that were issued in 2017 and 2018. We have to pay those. Downtown assets, so there's about $32 million that goes into the convention center and the Target Center. That's predominantly where that money goes. And to a much lesser degree, a little bit of money goes into the Commons and PV Plaza. Then the state gets to retain a certain amount of our local taxes for various purposes. And that's all pursuant to the 2012 legislation. So this is all prescribed in legislation. First of all, there's funds for the benefit of the MSFA. That's a term that's in the legislation. That began in 2014, and that's about a little over $2 million a year. That's for their operation. That's one of the ways that the city is participating in the U.S. Bank Stadium. Then starting in 2021, in a couple years, about $25 million of our local taxes will be retained by the state to pay for a portion of the state bonds and to pay for stadium operating and capital costs. That you can see that retainage of $25 million starts in 2021 after the convention center debt is paid off. So we've paid off convention center debt at $27 million a year. That $27 million a year basically gets redirected towards the U.S. Bank Stadium. This slide gives you a little bit more specifics on the 5 categories that make up this $27 million. First of all is the money for the benefit of the MSFA I mentioned, about $2 million. Then a portion goes to pay back some of the stadium debt. The state issued approximately $462 million back in 2014. And the city has to pay $150 million of that particular bond issue, plus interest. So that's about a third of the bonds is our responsibility. We'll pay $150 million of principal over time, and we'll pay probably another $150 million of interest as well. And that will happen over this time period from 2021 through 2043. Then some of our local taxes will be retained for U.S. Bank operating costs. That began already in 2016, and that number is about $6 million per year, and that inflates at a growth rate. Between 2016 and 2020, the state is actually making that payment for us, and then we are going to pick up that cost in 2021, and then we're going to pay the state back for these 5 years that they've made payments for us. Category number 4 is capital improvement costs have to be made or deposited at about $1.5 million. That started once again in 2016, and that inflates or grows at an inflation rate. The state is making those payments basically on our behalf, and in 2021 we'll start picking up the tab, plus we will be repaying the state for those 5 years that they contributed, which is category 5 is this reimbursement. So we have to reimburse the state with interest for whatever they contribute operating and capital improvements in that 5-year period. Hopefully that makes sense. Kind of breeze through that quickly. Then getting over into the operational side of the stadium, MSFA has a contract with SMG. SMG is the operator of U.S. Bank Stadium. They handle the day-to-day management and operation. This is pretty similar to the relationship that the city has with AEG to manage Target Center for us. In this contract between MSFA and SMG, operating and capital costs are split out. It's all sort of laid out who's responsible for what. There are performance measures, et cetera, in that contract. Then these last 5 slides, I think, are just really designed to give you a visual summary of the MSFA's financial condition and the city's participation in the U.S. Bank Stadium. So the first one is just showing revenue that is received by SMG under this contract. And you can see, if you look at the first bar, which is the MSFA's budget for this fiscal year, which ends at the end of this month, in their budget, they were projecting that event revenue makes up about 68 to 70% of what is received. That's the green or the blue part. The green part is the Vikings have to contribute to operating, make operating payments. And then the orange part is the city sales tax, which, as I mentioned before, the state is actually making this payment currently, but we'll be paying them back and then picking up that particular obligation in 2021. The next slide just shows you transfers and non-operating revenue. So this is what the MSFA actually receives. And they have 2 primary revenue sources. One is money they receive from SMG through their contract, which is about 80% of the total. And then we have to contribute our $2 million plus every year for the benefit of the MSFA. So you can see that's about an 80-20 split. This slide shows the MSFA's operating expenses and net income. So you can see for the current fiscal year, the MSFA operating expenses are about $4.8 million. In the budget, they were showing a negative net income due primarily to Final Four expenditures that they anticipated. We're not sure exactly what the actual numbers are going to be here. They may actually have a slightly positive or a slightly negative net income. But in the future, in the next several years, we're not, seeing any of those type of extraordinary expenses. So we would assume the MSFA is probably going to have some positive net income. This slide shows the sources of revenue for the stadium's capital improvements, of which we have to participate. So you can see in the current budget, it's split into 4 different categories. They're all about the same, $1.6 million, $1.7 million. There's transfers from some of the other MSFA accounts. The Vikings contribute, that's the blue, green. The city has to contribute local sales tax, that's the orange. And then the Final Four was also contributing about $1.7 million is the in the budget anyways. Going forward, then, there would not be a Final Four component. There would simply be transfers, Vikings contribution, and the city's sales taxes. Then this is just a quick snapshot out of the budget of what the cash balances would be in each of the 3 major accounts. So it just shows operating account at 4.7, capital reserve at 2.4, concession capital reserve at about $600,000. In total, about $7.7 million. So for a facility that size, that would appear to be healthy but not excessive. And then, in summary, I would just like to say that, the city finance staff is currently working with MSFA staff and staff over at Minnesota Management and Budget at the state level, ironing and working on the details of this agreement on the how much the city, how much the state will actually retain from us starting in 2021, its formulas and its methodologies, et cetera. And, U.S. Bank Stadium is obviously very early in its life, so many things are going to change. We'll be back every year to give you a snapshot and hopefully update you on things and keep you abreast of any new developments that come up. With that, Mr. Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Councilmember Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would say the thing I got the most constituent questions about was probably people reading stories in the paper about the budget for the blackout curtains and seeing things going over budget and saying, well, I guess we're going to pay for that. My understanding of this, and I want to make sure my understanding is correct, is that our contribution to the operating is fixed, that it didn't change because of an expense overage, but that we've got a $2 million commitment that is ongoing. So even if the stadium is making choices that end up or experiences things that end up increasing costs, that doesn't increase costs to the city from a taxpayer perspective. Is that accurate?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Fletcher, that's correct.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or discussions? Thank you, Mr. Winkelhaig, for your wonderful presentation, and we look forward to getting an annual update. I move approval to receive and file this report. All those in agreement say aye.
Aye.
Those against? Thank you. That motion passes. And now we have our final discussion item, item number 32, which is a 20-year neighborhood park plan, 2018 annual report. Receiving and filing the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board's annual 2018 annual report, including the 5-year project schedule. And we have the executive director of the organization, Mr. Al Bangora. And I think this is your first annual report?
First one, yes.
All right, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Good to have you, and go ahead.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Chair Warsami and council members. I'm going to give a quick overview, and then I will turn this over to our Finance Director, Julie Weissman, to give more details. Thank you for my introduction. And again, I'm the new superintendent for Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board. I've been into my 6th month, but I have lived in the city for 36 years and 19 years at the Park Board prior. It's been a pleasure to meet and work with some of you, and I look forward to working with you in the future. The purpose is providing a second annual report of the 20-year neighborhood park plan, NPP20, and as part of the ordinance requirement to make a public presentation to City Council. This report has been made available to the park commissioners and the public during our June 12th regular meeting at the Park Board. I want to give a couple of quick highlights for the NPP20 implementation, 2 particular projects that I'm very proud of. One was the PV Field Park dedication that we had. With that, we had some improvements, was 3 new full basketball courts, new play areas, new picnic pavilion, new central pathways through the park, additional paths, lighting, site grading, and rain gardens, new multi-use athletic field, opening in the fall of 2019 after turf grass is well established. And I know it's difficult for staff looking at it and for the community because it's really beautiful. It's going to be a lot of fun. So we're looking forward to that. A lot of the funding, the capital levy in 2012 and net debt bonds from 13 to 17, and that was in the amount of $677,600. The NPP20 capital funds, which was $1,511,000. The NPP20 rehabilitation funds of $243,625, and with that we did sidewalks and pavements, park lighting, below grade infrastructure, ADA improvements, and also neighborhood park amenities. Donations and grants was in the total of $270,875, and with that, those grants came from many people, many partners. Hope Academy donation for SOD, Ventura Village donation for SOD, Franklin Avenue Business Association donation for SOD, Phillips West donation for SOD, Ventura Village donation for the pavilion, Phillips West donation for the pavilion, U.S. Bank Places to Play grant through Phillips West, and also the Hennepin County Sidewalk grant, all totaling $270,875. And as you can see, SOD was very important. So a total investment of $2,703,100. The first phase was July of 2018, and then phase 2 was just recently completed again with the dedication in May of 2019. The other one I'd like to highlight is Painter Park Recreation Center. In the improvements, we had a furnace replacement with addition to air conditioning, ADA accessibility upgrades to the restrooms, drinking fountains, sinks, and reception desk, lighting replacement with LED fixtures, replacement of ceiling and floor finishes after abating asbestos and containing materials, and lobby remodel to improve staff views to entrances and create a central gathering area, and then a meeting room and office remodel to regain retainable program space. The funding sources, the NPP20 capital funds of $297,675, NPP20 rehabilitation funds of $375,000, park lighting, ADA improvements, for a total investment of 2018 and 2019 of $672,675. There was phase one that was in July of 2018, phase two in May of 2019. We're very proud of these particular projects, and again, Finance Director Julie Weissman will give more details, but we're very proud of these. So in closing, I would like to turn this over to Julie Weissman, Finance Director, and of course Michael Schroeder, Assistant Superintendent of Planning, and they'll be presenting the overview of the report. So thank you very much. I'm going to turn this over to Julie Weissman. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you very much, Mr. Superintendent. And before Ms. Wiseman starts, I want to say that was a good touch because PV Park is in my ward. So
Yes.
thank you very much. That was good mention for that. So go ahead, Ms. Wiseman.
Good afternoon, Chair Warsami and council members. You should have all received an electronic version of the 2018 20-year Neighborhood Park Plan. Again, the 20-year Neighborhood Park Plan was established through concurrent ordinances in 2016, and then also in 2016, the Park Board passed the criteria-based system for the neighborhood program allocations. The allocation of funding, which was a first in the country for this type of allocating of capital project funds, is data-driven. It addresses racial and economic equity, community characteristics, park characteristics. We also honored the previous CIPs prior to the Neighborhood Park Plan. So that honored projects from 2017 to 2021, and beginning in 2022, the criteria-based system is fully driving the allocations. Again, as the superintendent commented, the ordinance requires that we provide this public report annually, so we are here doing just that. The 2018 report includes some information regarding 2017, which was the first year, 2018, and then what we are planning for 2019. We also are required to report outcomes on improved efficiencies and costs. Increased maintenance will maximize the service life of park assets over time and reduce the backlog for repairs and rehabilitation projects. A reduced backlog results in larger number of assets that are consistently available to the public. There will also be some cost savings resulting from investments in energy-efficient materials in rehabilitation projects. For NPP20, we received a property tax levy increase in 2017 of $3 million. And because it's a part of our general fund property taxes, that amount is raised by our property tax levy increase each year. In 2017 and 2018, we fully spent those dollars on improvements in our maintenance service levels, as well as increases in repair work. The process that we utilized for increasing our efficiencies is analyzing the current procedure, evaluating and developing a work plan for improvements, training staff, and implementing pilot program changes, and then evaluating those outcomes, and then finally fully implementing new procedures. In your report, there is a chart about MPP20 maintenance and those service levels. Most of the service levels in 2018 have reached our target service level. There are just a couple that are they're improved from the pre-MPP20, but they're not quite at our target yet. And again, that's based on where they are in the process about analyzing and fully implementing the changes. I'm now going to turn it over to Assistant Superintendent Michael Schroeder, who will go over the capital side of the program.
Chair Warsame and Commissioners, I'll walk through the capital and a little bit on the rehabilitation side as well. The first slide you see here shows the $10.5 million in capital improvement programming that we do every year. It's based on the MPP20 $8 million and the $2.5 million that have been that have been present for us to use before. We take these dollars and we separate them into two large pots. One, the capital program, which you can see in the blue bars on the chart on the right, and the rehabilitation. And it's ideally split around 1/3 towards rehabilitation, 2/3 towards capital projects. We analyze that every year to make certain that we're keeping up with the rehab the way we need to in the program. When we look at the rehabilitation program, we know that eventually through this program, we're going to be doing capital projects in every one of the 160 neighborhood park properties. But until we get there, there are projects that we need to take on to repair and rehabilitate things just to keep us going until we get to the projects that are identified in the capital program. And what's important in that is that we recognize that there are park safety and code issues, and there are critical failures. You can see in the picture on the right the roof of the Brackett Community Center, which is a very difficult roof to repair, but we are moving through that process. In identifying what projects we pursue, we do a process similar to what Director Weissman was suggesting for the maintenance, where we're establishing a system to inventory all of the assets we have, assessing the condition, ranking them, and prioritizing them. The other thing that's not suggested here is that when we have a rehabilitation program that coincides or could be tied to a capital project, we actually merge the projects together. So on projects, as Superintendent Bangora was describing, for PV Field Park and for Painter Park, we've actually brought the two funding processes together under one contract for reconstruction and improvements. When I stood before you last time, we didn't have such glorious charts to show you in terms of how well we were doing. There were lots of 0% or low percentage completions because we were really just getting into the rehabilitation projects, and we were still assessing many of the features in the system. So if you look now at where we are for work that was initiated in 2017, we've completed everything except for the park lighting, and we are just this year completing the assessment of all the park lighting assets and moving through that process. So if you look through the various categories, this is where we have accessibility improvements under the ADA, buildings and recreation centers, roofs, heating, ventilation, air conditioning, all the things that we can repair until we get to a future capital project. 2018, you'll see that we're doing similarly well in most categories. Park lighting, because we're only getting to completing the assessment, is still at a relatively low number. And then operations facilities, we're actually directing funds for a couple of years. We've completed one operation facility on Washington Avenue North in the north side of Minneapolis, and we're focusing now on some rehabilitation work for our Hiawatha Tool facility at Cedar and Minneapolis Parkway. And then when we get to 2019, 2019 is the year where the funding would be initiated. And you'll see these categories are at 0, but they're actually a little bit more than that because this chart was benchmarked against work we had completed through March. So even in this chart, we've moved through several projects and are allocating rehabilitation dollars to projects. One other point that I'll mention as we look at how we do this, one of the things that has been really helpful to us as we move through the rehabilitation projects, and we've taken great advantage of it, is the Target Market Program. It's a process that has allowed us to get contractors more quickly and more directly engaged in working in projects, and it's been a real benefit to us in catching up from where we were just in regular operations and rehabilitation from several years ago. Julie Weissman mentioned our process for capital investments, and it's important to recognize that according to Chapter 16 of our ordinance, we are required to address them based on metrics that we do every year, based on the conditions in the park and conditions in the neighborhood, and then we allocate those fundings according to a chart. Right now, if you look at the overall chart of the 160 neighborhood park properties, I think we're through park number 44 in making allocations through the capital investment program, capital improvement program. This is the list of parks that we took on under the capital program in 2017. The one thing you'll note is Falwell Park, where we had not invested anything in 2017, but it's because this park is located in our North Service area. We completed the North Service area master plan this year. We didn't want to spend dollars there until we actually had a plan for how it fit into the north side, and we're actually moving through the scoping and engagement process for Falwell Park right now in 2019. 2018, so if you recall how we move through projects, we do the engagement in the year of the allocation. So 2018 was the first time we had dollars available for these parks. We go through a scoping and engagement process, followed the next year by the construction. So if you look at the column on the far right, you'll see there are several projects where we are still in the scoping and community engagement process, and there are several where we've actually are in the warranty. We have a 1-year warranty that we have on all our projects. Stewart Field is again in a service area that we haven't completed at the time that the capital allocation was made. So that one is the one that's kind of the outlier in this chart. And then, as I've been noting, 2019 is the year that dollars are allocated for these parks, and so you'll see these parks under construction in 2020. And with that, I will stand for questions and invite my colleagues to respond as well.
Thank you. Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you. Mr. Schrader, a question. As capital gets allocated in that year, you said we would see these sites under construction. Can you give us a sense, in general, I recognize some places like Curry Park have quite a bit more investment than some of the much smaller projects. Do you anticipate all of this work would be done in that year?
Chair Warsame, Commissioner Palmisano, we would hope so, and it's our intention to move through these projects as quickly as we can. We're limited, actually, currently by two things. Almost all of our work happens outside, so we have, I don't want to say a short construction season, but we don't have an entire year of construction weather to deal with. The other thing that we're facing, and I'm certain in your construction projects you're facing the same thing, is competition in the construction industry is very tight right now. If we look at Curry Park, we actually rejected one set of bids, and we brought more dollars into the program now through parkland dedication. We've rescoped it slightly, and we're actually going back out to bid, and hopefully we'll be awarding Curry Park this year. If we can get it awarded in the next couple of months, we will start work this year. The element of construction that is, and Superintendent Bangora noted this for the PV Field Park, is that takes us the most amount of time is the rehabilitation of a play field. So we go through, we do all the work, and we let it essentially do a grow-in for almost an entire season. And unfortunately, as Superintendent Bangora noted, everyone drives by, the grass looks beautiful, and we don't let people go out there. We really want it to get healthy and established before we subject it to the intensities of play.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And seeing no further comments, I just want to add my thank yous to the Park Board staff for the presentation and for the good work. You know, Curry Park is in my ward as well, so we'll welcome more development. And I think that when we had last term, when we had the equity matrix, you can see actually now that the areas and the parks, in the inner city parks that needed the most attention are getting them. So we really appreciate that. And thank you for all the good work. And seeing no further questions or comments, I move approval to receive and file that report from the Park Board. And all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those against? And thank you very much. And since we have no other items on our agenda, we are adjourned. Thank you.